Well, good morning and thank you very much for joining us. I am Yori Folani. Our guest this morning is Dr. Tony Ofoyeton. We'll be having a couple of guests this morning, but our first guest for the first half of the program this morning is Dr. Ofoyeton, Director General, International Institute of Professional Security. As always, Doctor, great to have you.
Good morning, Uncle Yori.
Thank you very much.
Nigerians.
Indeed, thank you very much for coming. Everybody has heard of the term kidnapper in Nigeria. It's become a ubiquitous term. But how do we go about tackling it? How do we go about tackling people being kidnapped? It could be a child, it could be, in fact, you might even be a person in uniform, you might be a traditional ruler. Everybody is susceptible. And then when we hear about tackling kidnapping in Nigeria, tell me, what do you make of this kind of a situation? The whole issue of trying to tackle kidnapping. How doable is it?
No, it is very doable. In short, it's not one of the major problems that ordinarily we should be agitated about, except for the fact that because it's been allowed for too long, so it's now a very big business. It's big business to the criminal, and it's also a very big business in terms of terrorism financing. Naturally, in every country where you fight against terrorism and insurgency, the level of kidnapping will be very high in such country because it is one of the sure means through which the terrorists raise funds for their operations. You see a man with a bedroom slippers asking for 100 million ransom. The question is, what is he going to do with it? He doesn't stay in the town. He doesn't stay in the city. You know, somebody is asking him to do that. Those are the men. So that is why you see the principle in anti-terrorism that says, follow the money. And definitely you would have 50% you would have solved the challenge in terms of terrorism. If the government is able to come to town with the fact that, look, this is a major source of terrorism financing, and they are able to put all machinery in motion, because at times to fight some of these crimes can be very expensive. So if the man that is at the helm of affair is looking at cost-benefit analysis and is not looking at it from a futuristic perspective, the tendency of not approving certain proposals and certain budgets will be very high. But if you understand the implication at national level and at domestic or home levels, then he will be able to understand that irrespective of the cost implication, it is better to use 1 billion naira to stop it right from the beginning, rather than, you spread it and over 10, 20 years you are still battling with it. I think that now comes to those that are at the aim of affair. To what extent are they ready to deploy resources? If you look at our boys that are fighting against insurgency and terrorism, what are the level of equipment they have? Because if you look at times, apart from the normal AK-47, the assault rifle that they have access to, now, do they have access to the required backup technology? The drone, the terrorist is running, for example. Now, they are scattered all over the forest. How do you use technology to be able to identify the exact place that they are? Or they just kidnapped some people and you have to pursue them. Now, how do you use technology apart from... Now, these are things that become more expensive when it comes to the fight against. Why I'm linking it is because it's more or less like a Sesame twin as it is today now. Apart from in some regions that maybe like Lagos State, some places where you talk about kidnapping for ransom being purely a criminal venture, just basically to raise funds, and those that are greedy. 80% of terrorism in the north are basically for 80% of kidnapping in the north are basically for terrorism financing. And that becomes a major issue, which I think that the government should come all out. So if the government is able to use the Ministry of Digital and Communication, is able to use the banks, the BVN, the NIN. Now, if the government is serious about all this, those that have compromised with all these kidnappers over the years, to what extent have they been arrested and prosecuted? And you are making examples out of them. And you are ensuring that all the machinery you have put in place legitimately, and you have convinced Nigerians that the BVN will help them, you have convinced Nigerians that NIM will help them, and they have all gone all out, even at times at the detriment of their time and pleasure to make sure that they have all these things. And at the end of the day, it is these same numbers that the terrorists or the kidnappers will still use to call, and they will get away with it. At times they will even change naira to dollar. At times they will insist that they don't want naira, they want dollars and all those stuff like that. But government can follow the money conveniently. If it's ready to do it, it will do it. There are compromise, even from the security agents. There are those that you look at, who are those that are supporting them. Then you now look at it from the, the issue of proliferation of light weapons and all those stuff like that. How are they getting their weapons? Now the channels of blocking those channels from the proliferation of what do you call it? The border lines, the illegal routes through which they come in and out and all those stuff. It's a holistic thing. Okay. But the extent to which the government is ready to come out is a product of the extent to which they are ready to also release the funds. Because it can be, yes, relatively expensive. But if they are ready to release the fund and they have good, sincere security officers there, which I believe we have in all security agencies, I'm sure that we won't be talking about what we are talking about.
Okay. Well, at this stage, let me talk about our other guest. He's joining us remotely via Zoom as a journalist and chairman, Northern Christian Youth Professional, Isaac Abrak. A fine morning to you, Isaac.
Good morning, sir.
Thank you very much for making time for us this morning. Dr. Antonio Feyeton is in the studio with me here at DG International Institute of Professional Security, and we started off the program together. But let me bring you in on this matter. He's spoken of the part that kidnapping plays in financing terrorists. But I was wondering what your experience is in regard to this. Are there different levels of terrorism, of kidnapping, for example? Because kidnapping is our main concern. I was reading, you read the news, you look on social media, and you find that, I don't know if there are some domestic terrorists as well. Whereas some terrorists are asking for 100 or more million, how about those people that are going into homes, posing as megadis, house guards, and are actually spies for the terrorists, and those ones, you kidnap you, they might not be able to have the hope of getting 100 million, but they are getting by, and we are hearing all these kind of stories. Is there a difference between that kind of kidnapping, dare I use the word professional, and the Ogbologbo ones that we know, that is the terrorists that are really fighting? Or is it simply that kidnapping is kidnapping?
Thank you for having me. In my own understanding, as a hostile environment journalist who has been covering the insurgency, in the past 15 years, and also a Boju man who grew up in Dangunkas of local government, grew up in the farms from my primary 4 to some level in my university. I grew up with Fulani people. I understand the crisis in the north. I understand the introduction of how they came in, at least that's of my knowledge. The kidnapping that is being done by the terrorists, and that we see, by time bandits are all the time. But at the end of the day, they are basically aided by Boko Haram potency. And why do I say so? When we were growing up in the 80s and the 90s, sure, we had issues about conflict between farmers, and herdsmen, but eventually this conflict, we didn't have weapons, mass use of weapons, being used in this. But we could see that when Boko Haram came,
before we seem
Hello?
to... Okay.
Hello?
Yes,
Hello?
we are here.
Yeah, you can.
Yes, please continue.
Okay, so absolutely. So when Boko Haram came in, we now saw that the farmers' headers crisis, especially in the Middle Belt, took a new turn. There were now use of weapons. You will now see the casualty rate, now going very high. So definitely there was an overlap, of what was happening in the Northeast. It spilled over, to the communal crisis or the farmers' headers crisis that you had in the Middle Belt. We also hear, as a journalist, we interacted with people. Some of the Boko Haram, when they started, when Mohammed Yusuf and Shekau started, they started recruiting people, mercenaries, from the Sahel, around Mali, Cameroon, Niger, Chad. They recruit these war merchants to come and help them execute attacks around the Northeast. And so, when there were crises, the communal crisis, the religious crisis, the farmer header crisis in the Middle Belt, sometimes we had our indigenous Fulani men who were aggrieved. They would run to the same market where Boko Haram was recruiting these people and hire them to come and execute attack. So that was how these mercenaries started spilling around all around the north. At some point, some of them now felt that, okay, if Boko Haram recruits me today and now say they no longer need my services, I have seen that Nigeria is a gold mine. I have seen that there's a lot of money in Nigeria. Let me just do the kidnapping this time around for myself, and make money. Then we also had the situation whereby even our local Fulani started getting complicit, in these issues. They started seeing that this is more lucrative than just heading, cattle. But at the end of the day, back to your question, at the end of the day, we have heard, especially from interaction with people who have been abducted, people who have been forced to join Boko Haram, and they were later released. We have heard from victims, we have, and also some of the retired Boko Haram members themselves. They formed some kind of clique. Sometimes Boko Haram layers with some bandits, give them help. When you do a certain kidnapping, there is an amount of money that you are to release to Boko Haram or ISWAP. I believe the military, the security people will know this. You are to release
given the mix that you present now, and I can see how it's beginning to sort of bleed into each other. What are the notable ideas